Hey, Satenico here with another comics reading from Godlovescomics. So, as you can see, it is going to be Alan Moore's The Saga of Swamp Thing, Book 1, alongside Stephen Bissette, John Constantine, and a few other artists that appear periodically throughout the series. This covers issues 20 through 27 of Swamp Thing, coming on the heels of pretty successful reading for V for Vendetta, which a lot of people seem to have liked. And I was pretty anxious to get to Swamp Thing, which is an amazing series, and read that. So let's get started. First of all, I'll say that Swamp Thing was created by, we'll see that on the next page. As you can see, this really nice cover is by Tom Yates. You can see his signature right there where the cursor is. And this was Alan Moore's first, I believe his first DC comic entirely. And so he's basically trying to wrap up most of the plot threads from the previous 19 issues and get a really fresh start and sort of prove his mettle in terms of American mainstream comics. And there you go. There's a beautiful title page. As you can see, it was written by Alan Moore and edited by Lynn Wein, pencils by Dan Day, colorist Tatiana Wood, inks by John Constantine, and lettered by John Costanza, created by Lynn Wein and Bernie Wrightson. And it's important to just mention briefly Lynn Wein and Bernie Wrightson, incredible creators, famous throughout the 70s and the 80s and right up until very recently. Both of them passed away in 2017, unfortunately, and both were almost the same age. I believe Lynn Wein was 69 and Bernie Wrightson was 68, about to turn 69. So it's just very ironic that both creators of Swamp Thing died in the same year, almost at the same age, albeit from different causes. I think Lynn was suffering from heart ailments and had a bypass surgery a few years prior, and Bernie Wrightson was struggling with brain cancer in the last few years of his life, which is, just terrible. And obviously, Bernie Wrightson, incredibly famous artist, came into his own in the 70s, and Swamp Thing is probably what he's best known for in terms of having a long-term sort of gig on a comic, because he sort of bounced around after that, from various comics, and also his incredible Frankenstein portfolio. Just an amazing draftsman, an amazing artist, and very soulful in his approach, and just really dedicated to the art of comics and to the craft of illustration as well. And sorely missed and just irreplaceable. And I think that Bernie Wrightson is pretty much uniformly loved throughout the comics community. Lynn Wein, very much underrated. Lynn Wein not only co-created Swamp Thing, a major creation for DC Comics, but he also co-created Wolverine with Roy Thomas and with John Romita. Herb Trimpe was the first to draw Wolverine in Hulk 181, but John Romita was the one who designed the initial costume. So Lynn Wein, just based on that alone, just based on creating Wolverine, would have put him in sort of the pantheon of mainstream comics creators. But he also created several of the new X-Men, including Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, which of course then formed, and it's Wolverine of course as well, which then of course was joined with the amalgamation of the original X-Men created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby to create the new X-Men with Dave Cockrum. And then Lynn was very busy as an editor and as a writer, so he just happily turned the series over to Chris Claremont, and so the rest is history. But two incredible creators. Sadly, both are lost, but we're going to look at their creation in the hands of Alan Moore, and of course Lynn Wein was still the editor here, so This is Swamp Thing. And by the way, Dan Day also, his brother Gene Day was a great artist as well. Best known for Master of Kung Fu, but also worked on a lot of other things. A lot of Marvel and DC comics, both as a penciler and an editor. Died far too young, maybe overworked. And so again, a really tragic loss. Tatiana Wood was married to Wally Wood, the EC legend, who also died at a very young age. And so, just a lot of sadness in terms of all of the connections here, but also a lot of incredible artists and just lengthy history within the medium. I had to come, Arcane. I had to be sure. Oh, I know. I saw your ship falling and burning. I know I saw it drop like a wounded sun, exploding beyond the mountains. I know that you couldn't have survived, but I didn't hear the rattle in your windpipe. I didn't see the glaze crawl over your eyes. I didn't see the body, Arcane. And I've learned that if you don't see the body, then the rotten stuff just keeps coming back. It's funny. The good can die alone and unnoticed, and they stay dead. Harry K., the man who saved my life. He was on your ship when it fell. He's dead now. Dead forever. I know that. I didn't come looking for him. I came looking for you. I had to come, Arcane. I had to be sure. So it's true. You're dead. Really dead. I don't think I realized how important you were to my life, Arcane. I don't think I really understood before this moment. You were my opposite. I had my humanity taken away from me. I've been trying to claw it back. You started out human and threw it all away. You did it deliberately. We defined each other, didn't we? By understanding you, I came that much closer to understanding myself. And now you're dead. Really dead. And what am I going to do now? Arcane is absolutely grotesque. At least there. Elsewhere. Well, General, you know where they are. What are you going to do about it now? Do? Isn't it obvious? I'm going to kill them, Dwight. I'm going to kill all of them. They're all there, Dwight. All our agents have confirmed it. The Cables, Barclay, the Tremaine woman, and the thing that was once Alec Holland, the Swamp Thing. According to our people in Virginia, the Holland creature has just concluded an extremely noisy battle with an old adversary of his. This adversary, a man named Arcane, had a strange kind of airship. He ran into a mountain range. Bang. End of battle. Have the satellite photographs? Take a look. So you're going with the UFO approach? Well, it's worked before. Locals almost always certainly heard the ship crash. We pose as a government. People tell them that it was a UFO, total security clampdown, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I guess everybody saw Close Encounters. They expect that kind of government action. Exactly. National security is one of those magical little phrases. It stops people worrying about what you're doing, where you're going, who you're killing. Everybody who knows the truth about Sunderland and the DDI is conveniently gathered in one small area. We go in, they get killed, easy as that. Sunderland is like a death machine, Dwight. It's sleek and coordinated and efficient. All you have to do is point it in the right direction. And set it in motion. I'm not sure what those balls are called. I remember them from when I was a little kid. I don't. Benoit balls, maybe, but that may be a much naughtier term for a different sort of object. But anyway, you pull one and just release it, and it clicks the others and just kind of makes a sin-like clicking sound. And obviously it's been used as a framing device here. I watched my men load the trucks and the copters this morning. They had guns and searchlights and flamethrowers. I still feel proud when I see things like that. I thought about all the people. Holland, Barclay, the others. They don't know what's coming, do they? They really don't know. They're cooling off after a battle they think they've won. They think they can relax. They think they're safe. Now the balls go completely awry. Critique. They're in for a rude awakening, Dwight. A very rude awakening indeed. Her name is Lisbeth Tremaine. She's used to taking her sunlight a little more diluted. Struggling awake, unsticking herself from the hot vinyl of the seat coverings, she starts to remember. She remembers the van breaking down. It had been late. It had been too far to walk. There had just been her and Dennis. She hopes Dennis is going to be okay about this. She hopes Dennis is going to maintain a sense of proportion, because otherwise it's going to be a long walk home. Like my mom has this place down in Florida. You'll like it there, Liz. We can get some sun, maybe drive out some of the shadows that have gotten into our lives. We can be normal people again. I mean, sure, I'm not forgetting about Alec. But, well, hell, Liz, we've got each other now. We need some time on our own. Dennis. Dennis, look. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have... Well, look, it's just that you keep saying we, Dennis. You keep saying us. And I don't see it like that. I mean, last night it was like, well, it was like a timeout, you know? It was like, well... just something that happened. It happened once and that's it. But you can't build a future around that. All we have in common is the horror in our lives, Dennis. That's all. That's all that holds us together. If we were living out in, I don't know, Miami County or somewhere, we'd be ripping each other's throats out within a month. I mean, you understand that, don't you, Dennis? Dennis, where are you? Hey, look. Let me explain. Dennis, you didn't let me explain. In silence, he walks away. In silence, she stares after him. A bird sings briefly and then stops, embarrassed. Far above, a helicopter drones through the morning. And then another. And then another. Elsewhere. Maybe I should one-page it. Elsewhere. I made my way back here to the moon. No sign of Dennis or Liz yet. It doesn't matter. I don't have anywhere else to go. Arcane. Arcane. Maybe you were right. Maybe you were right just to die like that. It's a new world, Arcane. It's full of shopping malls and strip lights and software. The dark corners are being pushed back a little more every day. We're things of the shadow, you and I. And there isn't as much shadow as there used to be. Perhaps there was once a world we could have belonged to. Maybe somewhere in Europe. Back in the 15th century, the world was full of shadows then, full of monsters. Not anymore. Things like us can't survive in the light, Arcane. Perhaps you realize that. Right at the end. Maybe you were right. Maybe we're better dead. Maybe the world has run out of room for monsters. You definitely get the sense that Alan Moore probably would have preferred to live in the 15th century when there were more shadows and more mystery and more myth and less explanation and more magic, of course. Also note the little smiley face here with a sleeping cap on top. This was a little bit pre-Watchmen, so there's no blood dripping down, but maybe a sign of things to come. Or maybe they're just getting harder to recognize. Get this straight. A monster, is that what you're saying? From a UFO? That's right, big green fella covered in awful slime and junk and stuff. They found a ship up beyond the mountains. You don't worry, Pop. We got this situation under control. That thing ain't gonna get very far. After all, it's a matter of national security. That magical phrase. Oh yeah, sure. Say, you need a hand with those searchlights, son? Elsewhere. Matt, how about a little light in here, huh? Abby, what happened? Where did you go? It's okay, Matt. It's okay. Later. So after we had saw the ship crash, Alec head up to mountains to look for the wreckage. He didn't say why, Matt. He told me something. Something about you. He said he thought that all those monsters and horrors and things, he said he thought you were causing them. He was right, Abby. Even I didn't know it until a while ago. But yeah, Alec was right. But it's over now. I've beaten it. While you were out, I've been drinking, Abby. I'd been drinking and I had one of those attacks. It was the worst yet. Only this time I fought it. I fought it, Abby. There were things with no eyes and things like damp, furry rugs that giggled with children's voices. There were things I can't tell you about, but I fought them. And I won. They just vanished. I felt a great calmness inside me. I knew that I'd beaten it, that I'd rid myself of this ability, this nightmare. I don't know where it came from, the power, maybe something to do with that electroshock therapy I got put through. It doesn't matter. It's gone. The craziness is over. I'm okay. We're okay, Abby. She doesn't seem okay. And speaking of his drinking, you see this double page sort of framing the vice of the Mighty Moose beer, I guess, which was what he drinks perhaps, and it has like a Bullwinkle sort of logo there. It's kind of funny. Look, I just want you to know that I love you, Abby. I want to tell you just how much, but I don't have the words for it. I don't have language. We used to be able to tell each other things like that without words. I know the drink messed up a lot of that, but, well, I'm through with that now. Hey, Abby, it's been a long time. Matt, I'm sorry. I've had a lot of that stuff away from myself. I can't just switch it back on just like that. It's okay, Abby. I understand. I can wait. Thanks. I mean, really, thanks a lot. Hey, look, I need to take the air, okay? I need a walk. Sure, Abby. Whatever. Later, she's gone. That's okay. He's not short of company. Of course, he hadn't told her the entire truth, the bit about wrestling with the visions. That was true enough, but he hadn't obliterated them. He just learned how to control them. He looks at his hand, something shimmers, something blue. He wanted Abby, but Abby hadn't wanted him. That was okay. That was no problem. He sips his drink. He shifts his weight in the chair, relaxing. He licks his lips. On his hand, a blue lady is dancing just for him. Elsewhere. You reckon it's in there, Otis, this bog animal? Oh yeah, it's in there for sure. And Barclay and Tremaine Broad, the rest. You say they should be getting theirs right about now, right? That's what I heard, Roy. You know, that old general is really tying up some loose ends here today, ain't he? He's tying them up all. He's tying all of them up, Roy. And that is exactly what Alan Moore is doing. That's the title of the story, Loose Ends. And Alan Moore is basically tying up the plot, tying up the loose ends from the previous 19 issues. Which is something too few writers actually ever get around to doing. Every damned one. Yeah, that's right. Room 18. Listen, we're checking out. I need my medical bag. You're a doctor? Little girl like you? No. But my friend is. It's his bag. He's waiting outside right now. He didn't think it was worth both of us coming in. Look, about the key. Oh, don't fret, honey. I got it right here. Room 18. Now, what is it about room 18? Oh, yeah. I remember a couple of friends of yours dropped by earlier. Maybe they was doctors, too. I told them to go into your room. They weren't in. You weren't in. They came right out. Oh, yeah. Matt and Abby. Right. Look, about this. Didn't say their names, but yeah, they could have been doctors. I guess. No. I tell a lie. They did say a name. Look, please, I have to go and fetch my friend's medical bag. I'm in a hurry. Allow me, pretty lady. Heck, Dallas Brandon at your service. I can see that you're busy right now. Why don't you just let me go in there with the key? Go pick up the lady's baggage for her. I'll be right back now. But I got it. It was Sutherland. No, it weren't. I'm thinking of Donald Sutherland, the actor. I seen him on cable just last night, film called Now Don't Look. It was an AHT movie, but... Or was it called Don't Watch Now? Anyway, at the end, Donald Sutherland goes into this cathedral. He's following this thing that looks like a little kitty in a red cape. He goes along these stairs, and at the end of this sort of landing... There's this little red cape kneeling. And so, he walks along, landing towards it, right? And he's saying, now, don't be afraid. He's saying, nobody's going to hurt you. Little thing in the cape turns around. It ain't no little kitty. It's an ugly little dwarf. And the dwarf pulls out this cleaver. And Donald Sutherland gets it right in the neck. Throom. Liz! Okay, thinks Liz got blown up, but this guy, Dallas Brandon, whoever he was, actually just came in and blew himself up for whatever reason. He finds her in a reception area. She's talking about dwarfs. She's talking about cowboys. He's heard that kind of talk before in Da Nang and Phnom Penh. Okay, I guess he's a Vietnam vet, even though he certainly doesn't look like one. All of a sudden, he isn't thinking Virginia anymore. He's thinking about jungle. He's thinking about night patrol. He's thinking incoming mail. The idea that there might be a backup in the area occurs to him about 5 seconds before the men's shiny shoes come past the lobby windows. All we have in common is the horror in our lives, Dennis. That's what she'd said. Maybe horror was all it took. Maybe they didn't need anything else to make it work. Maybe things would be okay between them. Just so long as they never ran out of horrors. She leans against him, scared, vulnerable, the way a woman should be. Dennis Barclay runs. Dennis Barclay smiles. I think Alan Moore basically saying that there was really no chemistry between this couple. The only thing that was really connecting them the whole time was that they were always beset by these horrors within this comic book. And so he was basically having them address it in actuality, and her actually stating that. And now another horrific act has occurred where she almost got blown up and some other people died. And he's actually really happy about this because that brings her back to him, connects her back to him temporarily, where he can protect her, even though I'm sure he just wants the horrors to perpetuate so they can stay together. Seems a rather risky romantic strategy. Well, just a little over the usual. No, wait. Geez, Henry, what kind of charge did you put in that thing? Well, just a little over the usual. I want to make sure. Oh, yeah. You made sure, all right. Oh, geez. Will you look at this? Henry, how many bodies do we have here? Exactly one or two? Well, two, I guess. We didn't see anybody leave. Couldn't we just count heads or something? Great idea, Henry. You find them. These bald eagles, I assume, at the corners of each page, upright on the top sides and upside down on the bottom, maybe represent the American military and, sort of how potentially corrupt they can be. You find them, I'll count them. 0 minus 15, 0 minus 10, minus 5. Okay, switch them on. Hey, that's nice. Halo of light around the whole woods. That's real nice. No problems with the flamethrowers, anybody? Okay. Now we're coming out the woods nice and slow from the north. Gonna do us a clean sweep. Everybody knows the score, right? Yeah, well, all right. Let's get some. Yep, gung-ho military guys. Light. White light. Hard and sharp and sudden. From where from and why? It isn't you doing this, Arcane. It can't be you. You're dead. I saw the body. So who is it out there? Maybe it's nobody. Maybe it's just a modern world coming to slap a condemnation order on the shadows. Aren't they going to leave any darkness for us, Arcane? Are they going to take away everything? Everything that's dark and private and silent. Copter. Abby, that you? What's going on? I thought I heard copters, Matt. Lots of copters over the woods by the motel. One of them's coming this way. It looks as if it's going to fire. That was our house. That was where we live. Yeah. Nowhere is safe anymore. Nowhere. Not for anybody. Not in the world of nature. This morning I watched a beetle that had gotten itself in trouble with some ants. First there was the beetle. Then there was just a beetle-shaped pile of ants. The beetle was bigger and stronger and more clever. Hey! But I guess there were just too many ants. This way, I seen him. This way! Yeah, he's heading south, all right. Yeah, that's affirmative, Andy. Spotted him a while back. He's, take her down, Giuseppe. I see him. Hey, hold on a second, will you? Andy sees something right there. Yeah, sure. You seen him where? Down there in that clearing. Why don't you take her down so we can get a good look before the snipers get through with him? Well, I don't know, Andy. We're supposed to be keeping a watch out is all, but then, what the hell? It'll be something to tell the kids about, right? Hold steady. I'm taking her. Down? Geo, there's something under us. We're tipping up. Geo, we're gonna... Kaboom. There's fire behind me. There's light all around me. I'm heading south. But there are too many ants, and there aren't enough shadows. And no matter how many of them I take out, no matter how hard I run, they just keep coming. I think they're going to get me this time. I think they finally ran out of room for monsters. It just looks like I ran out of room, too. There's a belt of blind whiteness around the woods. And beyond that, there's shadows. I wonder, what's in the shadows? It doesn't matter. I can't stay here. If I can just make it through the girdle of light, I'll be okay. I can do it. This body's near enough invulnerable. They won't be able to stop me. I better run. Run for the shadows. But the shadows, are so very far away. And then there's this beautiful, almost Mobius style drawing by Steve Bissett and Tote Laban of him just being riddled with bullets. Initially, I thought the red was blood, but the red are the bullets going through him, and the yellow in the back is just the plant fluid tissue or whatever being blown out the back of his skull and the back of his, out of his back and out of his torso. He's just riddled with bullets, including one directly through a skull, and finally he just collapses. Is it, yeah, it's dead. Next, the anatomy lesson, which is an absolute masterpiece. And here you see Swamp Thing facing off with Sunderland. And this cover again is by Tom Yates. It's raining in Washington tonight. Plump, warm summer rain that covers the sidewalks with leopard spots. Downtown, elderly ladies carry their houseplants out to set them on the fire escapes, as if they were infirm relatives or boy kings. I like that. My name is Jason Woodrue. Dr. Jason Woodrue. I'm here in my apartment. I'm watching the rain, and I'm thinking about the old man. He'll be pounding on the glass right about now, or maybe not now, maybe in a while, but he'll be pounding. And will there be blood? I like to imagine so. Yes, I rather think there will be blood. Lots of blood. Blood in extraordinary quantities. The Anatomy Lesson by Alan Moore, Steve Bissett, and John Tote Laban. The last issue was drawn by Dan Day and Tote Laban. Now, this is when Steve Bissett takes over. And he develops an incredible chemistry with John Tote Laban. Maybe this should be one page as well. Oops. Sorry about that. I remember the old man showing me around the building. He was so proud of it, like a child with the biggest dollhouse in the world. Of course, this was after his corporation had secured my release from jail. Well, it's very empty. I'd expected a higher security profile. It's all electronic, Dr. Woodrue. Silicone sentries and digital dogs. I control everything from a console no bigger than a checkerboard. Spares me a lot of grief with labor relations. Through here. He's in here? How long is he? About 2 weeks. He's been here since we shot him. Well, Dr. Woodrue, don't be afraid. Open it up. There, gray, brittle, tattooed by frost, quite dead. This was my first glimpse of the Swamp Thing. Beautiful drawing of his frozen, bullet-riddled corpse, if that's even the right word for a Swamp Thing. And this was once a human being? His name was Alec Holland. He was a doctor like yourself. He was doing some government work, developing something called a biorestorative formula, which was intended to promote crop growth. The experiment was sabotaged. There was an explosion. Holland and his chemical soup went into the swamp where the project was located. This is what came out. You mentioned Linda Holland? His wife and co-worker. You know these people, liberal, equal relationships, caring and sharing. His wife was shot and killed shortly after Holland vanished in the explosion. She's the reason you're here, Woodrue. You see, we got interested in this formula that Holland had been working on, so we had her exhumed. It made sense after all. Apart from her husband, she was the only human who had been exposed to the formula. She'd been working with the stuff for months. We figured it may have permeated her cellular structure just through the repeated skin contact. So we dug her up. We had some people poke around a little. You know what we found? Nothing. Oh, the formula collected in her body. It just hadn't done anything. No reason why it should, of course. The formula wasn't designed to affect human tissue, just plants. Except that doesn't explain our friend in the cryo chest, does it? We'd assumed that the formula had somehow turned Holland into a plant. If it doesn't affect human tissue, that is patently impossible. You begin to see why we arranged your release from jail, Dr. Woodrue. Speaking of which, I believe it's time that we saw your credentials. That isn't your skin, is it? My files say it's artificial. You can dissolve it. Your files are very accurate, General. There. Are you satisfied? Perfectly. You're Woodrue. You're the Floronic Man. When can you start? I started the next day. The old reptile knew I'd start the next day. He knew I'd do damn well anything he pleased if it kept me out of prison. The old reptile. I wonder if he's pounding yet. Pounding on the glass, his fist like withered little apples. I started the next day with the autopsy. I remember clearly the moment before I began to cut. I was very excited. Since the biochemical fluke that had transformed me, I had longed for a chance to examine another human-vegetable hybrid I could learn so much about myself. I'd heard of the legendary Swamp Man, of course. There was that awful book by. Was their name Tremaine? Yeah, I think so, Tremaine. I'd often fantasized about the chance to examine such an organism close up. And this was as close as one was likely to get. I opened him up. He had things inside of him. This is one of the things that makes Alan Moore so brilliant, is that Floronic Man is just a peripheral character in the DC universe. Barely anyone would cite him as being a major character or a major villain or anything. Kind of the male version of Poison Ivy, except Poison Ivy is sexy and a Batman villain, so everyone knows her. But by making this incredible correlation, oh, he's part plant, part man, somehow this desire to discover more about himself through the Swamp Thing, Alan Moore brings just so much more depth to this character and makes him incredibly relevant to this story. And it's just typical of what Alan Moore was able to do with taking really peripheral, underdeveloped characters in the DC universe and turning them into something amazing. There were 2 large pod-like structures within the chest cavity. What are they? His lungs or something? No, they look like lungs, but human lungs have tiny capillary tubes that let oxygen pass through into the blood. That's what lungs are for. These are vegetable fiber. Vegetable fibers are too coarse to allow molecules of oxygen through in that way. These things suck and blow, and they don't do anything else. They don't work. They're not lungs. I wonder what they are. I wondered the same thing about the sponge-like vegetable brain that we found inside the leathery skull. Even without the bullet hole, it couldn't possibly have worked. It had no synapse gaps. I wondered about the useless heart. I wondered about the unworkable pseudo-kidneys. I wondered how long I could keep on drawing blanks before the old man sent me back to jail. I wondered. There were long weeks, long and fruitless. I saw a lot more of the old man, my distaste ripening toward loathing with each encounter. In the evening, when the minimal staff had gone home, he would stroll proudly around that huge and empty tomb of a building. Sometimes he'd insist that I accompany him. He'd talk about the electronic security, about how all the doors were controlled from his office. Sometimes he'd talk to me about career prospects. The word freak was used at least once. Jail was mentioned. I stood there, and I took it. And every night I came back to these special apartments that he'd rented for me. Every morning I set to work hauling organs that couldn't work out of a body that had never needed them. The biorestorative formula had turned Holland into a plant, except that it couldn't have. It didn't work on human tissue. The Swamp Thing had organs like those of any living creature, except that they did not, could not, and had not been designed to function. It was more than a human mind could be expected to unravel. I had the answer within 6 weeks, being not entirely a human mind, but also a little bit lucky. It was as if the clouds were suddenly blown away. I was working late. I was tired. I opened a reference book at the wrong page and began to read. It was an essay on planarian worms. Not what I wanted at all. And then suddenly, there it was, as plain as the nose on your face. Kind of amusing because basically the nose on his face is getting washed off in the shower, or in the rain, I should say. Whatever he's in. The answer. My skin is dry. Outside is raining. I'm thinking of the liver-spotted fingers clawing at unbreakable glass. I'm thinking about the old man there in his office when I went to tell him of my discovery late this afternoon. I'm thinking about melting frost and trickling water and something strong and soft and green thrusting through the dead and petrified grayness. The old man has no one but himself to blame. He didn't understand. Even when I explained it to him, he didn't listen. Well, Dr. Woodrue, I'm listening. Planarian worms, General. They're the key to everything. Oh my God, it's so obvious. He's actually so happy because he's a scientist and he came up with this amazing discovery. And of course, Sunderland doesn't care. He really doesn't care. You see, a while ago, some people did an experiment. They taught a planarian worm to run a simple maze. They educated it. Then they just chopped it up, fed its remains to a batch of planarian worms that couldn't run the maze, except that after digesting their educated comrade, the worms could run the maze perfectly. Don't you see, General? The implication is that consciousness and intelligence can be passed on as foodstuffs. That maybe explains the custom among cannibal tribes of eating the wise man after his death in order to receive his wisdom. General, you could go to a delicatessen and order Einstein on pumpernickel. Dr. Woodrue, I am becoming angry. You talk about worms, you talk about cannibals. None of this has anything to do with Holland. None of this has anything to do with the job I'm paying you for. All right, General. All right. Let's talk about Holland. Let's talk about his accident. Imagine him regaining consciousness there in his cabin that night. Tick, 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 tick. There's something taped to the underside of his workbench. With mounting apprehension, he scrabbles towards it. It's dynamite, 5 sticks of it, and he's maybe 18 inches away from it when it explodes. Tick, tick, click. The combined effects of the blast and the reflex muscles in his legs propel him through the door and into the swamp. But Alec Holland is already dead. His body goes into the swamp along with the formula that it was saturated with, and once there, it decomposes. A batch of swampland like that would be teeming with microorganisms. It wouldn't take long, General. But what about the plants in the swamp? The plants that have been altered by the biorestorative formula. The plants whose hungry root systems are busily ingesting the mortal remains of Alec Holland. Those plants eat him. They eat him as if he were a planarian worm or a cannibal wise man or a genius on rye. They eat him and they become infected by a powerful consciousness that does not realize it is no longer alive. Imagine that cloudy, confused intelligence, possibly with only the vaguest notion of self trying to make sense of its new environment, gradually shaping the plant cells that now inhabits its shape into a shape that's more comfortable with. It remembers having bones, so it builds itself a skeleton of wood. It remembers having muscles and constructs muscles from supple plant fiber. It remembers having lungs and a heart and a brain, and it does its best to duplicate them. You see, we were wrong, General. We thought that the swamp thing was Alec Holland, somehow transformed into a plant. It wasn't. It was a plant that thought it was Alec Holland. A plant that was trying its level best to be Alec Holland. And that pathetic, misshapen parody downstairs in the cryo chest was the closest that it could get. But there's something else. Something very important. You see, if that's a plant that we have down there, Dr. Woodrue, I think I've heard enough. This is an absolutely devastating and brilliant revelation by Alan Moore right here. that kind of is unlike anything that you ever see in comics, and kind of unlike anything in fiction in general, because it's always been the case in comics and even in, traditional genre fiction with a monster character that we empathize with it because the man inside of the monster, whether it's the thing under his lair of rock, periodically you see Ben Grimm sort of peek through, or Ben Grimm get cured for a day and then inevitably he turns back into the thing, and we really empathize with his plight and his despair of being trapped inside that rocky surface. Or Bruce Banner, who turns into the Hulk and then turns back into Banner, but he's this human being inside this monster. Or even Frankenstein, who was a composite of human parts but still had humanity. This is devastating because all along for the prior 19 issues and since he was created, you assumed that Alec Holland was this man trapped inside the Swamp Thing, And in this case, he's not. Alec Holland was dead. He was completely destroyed. And then the plants just they absorbed his consciousness, his intelligence, and just tried to replicate a human body because that's what his consciousness was comfortable with. That's what it wanted. But they're still just plants that replicated a human life, but they're not Alec Holland. But they thought they were. And so it's just a devastating sort of terrifying sort of outcome, in the sense that, this is almost an alien life form, even though it's very much organic and very much from Earth, but it's not Alec Holland. It's not human. There's no human in there. And that just proves even more devastating. Enough, but you can't possibly have grasped all of the ramifications of what I've been saying. You don't have the correct background. And besides, if that is a plant down there, Woodrue, I'm not in your terms an intelligent man. I'm merely shrewd, but being merely shrewd has secured me a vast financial empire, has enabled me to watch while cleverer men went penniless to their graves. True, I may have missed some of the ramifications of your rather muddled little speech, but I grasp the basic principle well enough. That principle, that breakthrough, was all that was needed. There are others who can be paid to see their work through its conclusion. You see, I am very rich. I do not need to be an intellectual. I do not need to understand how this computer works to know that if I push that little button, all the sprinklers start up, or the doors open and close. I do not need the ramifications. I do not need the correct background. And you, Dr. Woodrue, now that you've provided me with my breakthrough, I need you least of all. I have a phone call to make in the outer office. I'll sort out the termination papers when I get back. The implication here being that he's just insulted by Woodrue's intelligence and sense of superiority. So he fires him. But of course, if he has to hire other scientists to continue the work, he still has to hire intellectuals. But maybe he's also sort of prejudiced against Woodrue because Woodrue, in his eyes, is a freak. He's a mutant of sorts. But still, it doesn't quite make sense other than he's just insulted. And that's how the old man fired me, just like that. Then he sauntered out of his office, a self-made man, a common man, by God, who just put one over on an uppity intellectual. He was chuckling to himself. So was I. He'd left me alone with his computer, and I understood exactly how it worked. Sunderland hadn't been bragging. From that console, you controlled the whole building. You controlled the elevators, the lights, the switchboards, and the thermostats. In the freezer units, and the doors. See Swamp Thing defrosting there in a sense. It's starting to melt and then also starting to bloom inside his chest cavity. He's sort of covered in encasing of dead bark. I'm sitting in my apartment outside. It is raining. I am laughing very loudly. Friends have told me it is not a sound conducive to tranquility. I'm thinking about the old man. He'll stay late. When everyone has gone, perhaps he'll read through the notes he wouldn't permit me to keep, skipping the big words. Then maybe he'll want to take a stroll, like every other night, stroll around the biggest dollhouse in the world. He'll punch one of his little buttons to switch the door mechanisms to manual so that he can control them while he's away from his checkerboard. Then he'll strut proudly down the hall and think how lucky he is to have all this. He should have let me finish. He should have listened. Then I'd have been able to explain the most important thing of all to him. I'd have been able to explain that you can't kill a vegetable by shooting it through the head. Oh, you could give it such a shock that it would plunge into cellular coma. You could keep it in that state by placing it in a freezer unit, but you couldn't kill it. Really, the old man could have worked that out for himself. He just didn't have the correct background. I wonder what he's doing now. I wonder how long he'll be able to resist going down there and taking a look. Perhaps he'll be in time to see it, the gray husk splintering and tearing, the raw, wet, implacable greenness beneath. Perhaps he'll reach the basement in time to actually see it. Or perhaps not. No, he's a little late. If the body is already gone, what will he do then? What will the old man do? Well, I guess he'll go back to his office. He'll want to phone a Sunderland SWAT team to come and bail him out. That's what a rational man would do. And a walking pile of mold and lichen and clotted weeds that thinks it's a rational man, I guess I would do pretty much the same thing. I wonder what it will look like, so new and raw and green. And I wonder how much it will have seen. Are you still intelligent? Can you understand what I'm saying? His eyes are burning red. Kind of alien, fearful, angry. The file on you. Look, I don't know if you've read it, but that file there, yes, I have read the file. Like it? Judging by those eyes, I would think not. Especially when he read that his wife had been exhumed, or at least Alec Holland's wife. I'm thinking about the old man. I'm thinking about the cracking of his joints as he runs. I'm thinking about the terror in his ancient, atrophied heart. This is his building, you see. This is the place where he was safe. Now the blind glass and the dispassionate metal mocks him with his own reflection. We're frightened and small and scurrying, like a beetle in a box, like a worm in a maze. Of course, there's never been any real evidence of the Swamp Thing intentionally hurting or killing anyone. The old man shouldn't really be in any real danger at all, as long as the creature hasn't read my notes. tears streaming out of his face, his nose running. But if he has read my notes, you see, throughout his miserable existence, the only thing that could have kept him sane was the hope that he might one day regain his humanity. The knowledge that under all that slime, he was still Alec Holland. But if he's read my notes, he'll know that just isn't true. He isn't Alec Holland. He never will be Alec Holland. He never was Alec Holland. He's just a ghost dressed in weeds. A great line. I wonder how he'll take it. And I wonder how the old man will take it when the doors won't open. He'll pound, he'll hammer, he'll wheeze, and he'll scream, and he will not be able to comprehend how this could be happening to him. The old reptile. And will there be blood? I don't know. I don't know if there will be blood. It isn't important. It won't spoil things if there is no blood. The blood doesn't matter. Just the dying. The dying's all that matters. No blood. He's definitely dying, though. And that may also be Alan's commentary on sort of the censorship of the comics code. Although I'm sure he could have shown blood splattering down, but that became more likely once they dispensed with the comics code and moved this to Vertigo, which I think they may have started just for Alan Moore, but may have been for Sandman. I don't remember exactly. Thought it was for Swamp Thing. And what then? Where would the creature go then? I have to know. I have to follow him. There's so much to learn, so much to know. Where would I go if I were the Swamp Thing? I go back to Louisiana, back to the mud and the steam and the flies, back to the bayou, back home. It's dark, it's late. I have a lot to do tomorrow. No matter. For the moment, I am simply content to think and to plan and to listen. It's raining in Washington tonight. Next, swamped. And this is from issue number 22. Again, another colorful cover by Tom Yates. And you see maybe a little homage to Bernie Wrightson there with the Frankenstein creature, and as well a wolf man, Tyrannosaurus Rex, all kinds of monsters. It all makes sense once the story unfolds. Louisiana, late summer. Abby, will you just wait up and listen? Just for a moment, just listen. Okay, Abby, we're not going to find him. We don't know for sure that he came here after Virginia. We don't even know if he's still alive. Abby, listen. We've got our own problems. We have to find a fireplace to live. We have to find some place to live. We have to find jobs. We have to find Alec. Well, yeah, sure. But after we got all this other stuff straightened out, I mean, where are we supposed to start, for God's sakes? Look at this place, Abby. It's vast. It's vast and it's gray, and it's also been raining for weeks, and I'm tired. I think we should go back to our hotel. I mean, is that unreasonable? Abby. Beautiful drawing of the flora and the fauna lily pads, a little burst of baby alligators in the swamp coming out, probably unhatching. And there it is. The title page, Swamped. Created by Lynn Wein and Bernie Wrightson. Oh, God. Amazing drawing here. This is the Swamp Thing. But he's just consumed by all these plants and roots, ferns, and these potato-like tubular things growing out of him, and frogs, and he's just completely integrated into nature once again, so it's pretty hard to draw and make it look like there's some semblance of a human shape there and a head, and at the same time so integrated into the swamp that he's almost camouflaged. A beautiful drawing by Steve Bissett and John Toleben, as usual. Matt, what's happened? This is Alec, isn't it? But Matt, what's happened to Alec? Matt, look, oh no, Matt, look, he's rooted. He's rooted into the swamp. And, oh, look, he's got stuff growing on him and everything. Oh no. Oh, Alec. Abby, look, I don't know how to. Oh no. What? In his arm. I saw an insect. There's an insect in his arm. Look, you probably imagined it. I didn't. I saw it. This is horrible. He's dead, isn't he? Alec's dead. No, he's not. She's like panicking. Like, she thinks of him so much as a human being. And so, thinking of him being rooted and things growing on him. He's a plant. He's a part of the swamp. So those things are normal. And even the fact that there are insects crawling his arms doesn't matter to him, but that shows that she still thinks of him so much as being a human being. And Alec is more of a human being, perhaps, than the Floronic Man. But as you can see, this can, it's a pretty funny name, Flexi Flesh. He sprays it on and just forms this artificial skin. You see at the very bottom here, there's a snake swallowing a frog. Very bottom of page 3. I'm sorry if I startled you. My name's Woodrew, Dr. Jason Woodrew. I'm a friend of Alec's. He just comes out of nowhere in the swamp. Yeah, us too. I'm Matt Cable. This is my wife, Abigail. We had lost touch with Alec and figured we might make his way back here. How did, Matt, wait, Dr. Woodrew, just who the hell are you? The logical question. I'm a botanist. I've been doing some work recently for one of the big industrial combines. That's how I met Alec. They captured him and... Wait a minute, is this Sunderland you're talking about? You know Sunderland? Oh, well, he blew up our home a couple of months ago. But other than that, we aren't really what you'd call close. Ah, I see. All right, Miss Cable. Yes, I was working for Sunderland, and they had plans for Alec that I couldn't go along with. I decided to get him out of there in one piece. That's one piece? It's as close as you're going to get. I'm afraid that Alec suffered a psychological setback while in Sunderland's care. Psychological? He's rooted. He's got bugs in him. What's psychological about that? Miss Cable, you're not letting me finish. While in Sunderland's care, Alec discovered hard new scientific evidence concerning his origins. Evidence that implied he wasn't really Alec Holland. evidence that he was a mass of plant fiber that had somehow been infected with the consciousness of Alec Cullen. Just the moss-encrusted echo of a man, not a man at all. I've been here for 3 weeks now studying him. Believe me, Miss Cable, whatever this looks like, the problem is psychological. Imagine all those years of hoping that one day he'd retrieve his humanity, only to find he'd never had it in the first place. He's given up on being human. It got to be too much for him, and he had to let it go. He's withdrawn. He's a vegetable, quite literally. He hasn't moved in a fortnight. He's put down taproots and stopped pretending to breathe. And then there are these fascinating tubers that he's producing. Haven't had a chance to study them up close, but I took a schist from one of them and examined it through a microscope. Similar structure to yam, maybe even edible. Tears are streaming down her eyes, and she's horrified at the thought, that he just plucked a piece of something that's essentially a yam, but he plucked it from what she considers her friend and still a human being, and he talked about it being edible. She does not accept that Alec is not a man, so she's really disgusted by all of this talk. Notice in this frame this cool little drawing of a raccoon in the forefront. Easy to overlook because the eye is drawn to the tiny figures in the distance. She's about to throw up. Miss Cable. Look, Dr. Woodrow, Abby's not feeling so good. She's been under a lot of pressure. And well, we're in a motel just outside of Huma. I better get her back there. Yes, of course. Maybe we'll be back soon. I don't know. Maybe when Abby's rested. I'll be here. Well, yeah. Goodbye. Goodbye, Mr. Cable. They splash away through the swamp, through the rain. How cretinous they are, how frail and squeamish. Really, what can one expect from creatures made of meat? Not like us, eh, my friend? Not like us. You're making the change, aren't you? Giving up the illusion of meathood, sinking back into the soft and welcoming green. It is breathtaking to observe. How I envy you. How I wonder where you are. And the colors, as well as the frames, and the wobbly panels, and the surrealistic illustrations all indicate where he is. He is in his mind, deep in his subconscious, in a dreamlike state. And as with all dreams, there are figments of reality, little bits of reality that you remember, as well as complete non sequiturs and all sorts of things that break physical reality, that indicate that you're in a dream. But this is where he is. To Alec and Linda, it's a lovely wedding reception, Alec. You must tell me, what's in these hors d'oeuvres? I think Linda said something about planarian worms? Abby, what are you doing here? We haven't met yet. Oh, Alec, don't be such a vegetable. Look, I must dash. I see my uncle over there, talking to my husband. They're inseparable insects, you know. Your uncle? You mean Arcane? But he's dead. I saw the body. Oh, that was just a plant. But then so are you. Bye. Alec, I don't feel very well. It's this bullet hole. Linda, I'm sorry, Alec. This means you'll be a grass widower. It's pretty funny, a grass widower. There is a tiny image of Batman in the background of that panel, the bottom left. Linda, I love you. Please don't go. Linda, please. I'll buy a restorative formula. I'll do anything. Don't leave me, Linda. And she just sinks into the ground or the ether, leaving only behind this wreath of roses that were on her head. Matt, Linda's buried. We've got to dig her up. Leave it to me, son. I've done it once and I can do it again. That's Sunderland, who's also dead now. Alec, you can't dig in your wedding suit. In your wedding clothes, you'll need a mud suit. A mud suit? Can I just wear my lab smock? Don't be silly. Your smock was destroyed in that explosion. Of course, so was his body, but that's not weighing in here. Just put your arms in here. Now let me zip it up. There. Is that comfortable, Alec? Alec, are you okay in there? Matt, he isn't breathing. The lungs in that suit have no capillary action. Remember? Get it off of him. It's okay. The suit's only made of mud. You can scoop it off in handfuls, just a little more. There. Now his torso's completely gone, just a pair of legs. But Matt, where's Alec? Alec isn't here. Brilliantly comes around full circle. Alec isn't here. Alec is no longer, there is no man within the mud suit. There is no man within the swamp thing. That's the point, and that's the point that really horrifies Alec, particularly, or the swamp thing, who wished he were Alec. And it's also brings it back to the present, because Alec's mind is not present within, or Swamp Thing's mind is not even present within his body. He's just vegetating. Sunset over Huma. The rains have stopped, clouds like plugs of blooded cotton. Wool dabbed ineffectually at the slashed wrist of the sky. She's been out walking by herself again. She's been thinking about Matt. She's been thinking about Woodroo. She's been thinking about Alec and edible tubers and whether she's losing her mind or not, just walking, thinking stuff like that. Swamped. She's going home now, going home to sleep. Matt will probably sit up alone again, eating pink burritos in the cellophane blue light of the TV. How is it possible to live with someone and yet feel so utterly garbled text, Matt dripping gulps, alone? Like trapped flies, the low buzz of whispered laughter, voices, Matt's, a woman's. A word here, a blurred phrase there, something about honey. Something about no. No, she couldn't have said that. Who is it in there? Who is it in there with her husband? As a child, she waked to the restless dark of her room and know that something crouched behind her. Something with quick lime on its breath and curling fingernails, a heart that brimmed with maggots. She'd lie there, a stillborn scream curdling in her throat, and listen to its soft and liquid wheezing. And eventually, when the terror outdistanced the reality, she'd open her eyes. Matt! And take a look. Slam. Yes? And there'd be nobody there. He's just sitting there watching TV. So the voices she may have heard were from the TV, or she may have actually heard something because Matt was conjuring up a woman. He was conjuring up company, and he may have just made it dissipate right before she opened the door. I'm not really sure. Nobody there at all. It's as if his humanity had just leaked away down the shoots and stems, dissipating, trickling out into the swamps. I wondered what it will be replaced by. Tonight's polygraph readings were the most exciting to date. I took readings on the creature, took readings from the surrounding vegetation, and the lines were identical. He is perfectly at one with the swamp. He feels what it feels, knows what it knows. What must it be like to spread out with the water hyacinths in an implacable choking net? To know the gray dreams of the Spanish moss. I hunger for it. Just as I thought. Perfectly edible. He actually cooked and ate the yam that he picked off of Swamp Thing's body. Eats. Come and get your eats. It's okay, Linda. I just heard a voice. We can get you there. We can get you help. Where there's a voice, there's bound to be people. Howdy, strangers. Just in time for the barbecue. What can I get you? It's my wife. She needs a doctor. Well, what do you know, as it happens? That's just what we're eating. Sit down and tuck in. Oh, by the way, you're not Jewish. No. I come from Holland. Good. That's good. We're all just plain Aryan worms here, you understand? Well, don't stand on ceremony. Eat. This stuff's real brain food. But there's nothing left. It's funny here because these are, it's his subconscious, and he's got it set in his head now about the planarian worms, which basically destroyed all of his delusions of humanity, or illusions of humanity. And it's just, it's really funny. He says he needs a doctor for his wife, and they say, hey, yeah, no problem. We're eating a doctor right now. And of course, they absorb the intelligence of whatever they're eating, so that would be good. And most funny, if you can even see on the screen, that little picture, that little sauce picture in the middle elongated panel says Hollandaise sauce, which is pretty funny. Alec Holland. Oops. He says there's nothing left. Hey, you're joking, right? You can't really be that green. We left you the best part. We left you the humanity. Try not to lose it. He looks at his wife again. I'm so sorry, Linda, but I just can't carry both of you. And leaves are sitting there at a picnic table, blowing in the wind. Incredibly poignant scene. Alec, come back. Pretty amazing scene. I mean, he's carrying around the grief of losing Alec's wife, Linda. I say Alec's wife because he's not really Alec, but it's Alec's wife. And also of losing his humanity, because finding out the planarian worms just absorbed his consciousness, or they weren't even really a planarian worms, they were just microorganisms in that swamp, but they were empowered by the biorestorative formula. But anyway, he realizes he can't fight to retain his humanity and also carry around the grief for his wife, so he has to leave one of them behind, and he stops grieving for her, essentially. He's not actually leaving her behind because she's long dead. In fact, he's long dead. It's very complex. Please, Alec, wherever you are, just come back. I don't care what they've told you. I don't care about all this new scientific evidence concerning your origins. Alec, you were not a damn vegetable. For God's sake, you're human, Alec. Alec, you're the most loving, the most gentle, the most human man that I've ever met. Don't go. He's listening to all of this, Matt. And this is the most passionate and loving she has sounded the entire time. It's not directed at him at all. It's directed towards the Swamp Thing. So that's got to be incredibly painful for him. But he still sort of consoles her and puts his arm around her, and they walk back. They're going. Good. If there's one thing that I despise, it's the sound of steak sobbing. I had not expected them back so soon after yesterday. Annoying, stinking cattle. They stayed all morning. I cannot tolerate interruptions now. I am close to something. I sense it in my deepest fiber. I feel it in my innermost rings. Rings like a tree. I wonder, do you even know who I am? Perhaps you read my works once when you were Holland. I'm a noted botanist, you see? Whatever the meat world chooses to call me. My success within the field is considerable. I can communicate with plants. If I wish, I can even control them. Snick. But I cannot know what it is to be a plant. My intelligence is still far too human to see, too far removed from that viridian state of grace. I need an intermediary. I need a go-between. Wherever you are, my friend, whatever you have lost, you still have something that I want. No, you can't have it. It's my humanity. It's all I've got left. Tell it to the Marines, son. That's right. We all lost our humanity. We all need some patching up. You can't keep it to yourself, Holland. We all want a piece. Just don't let it bug you. Hey, I'll drink to that. No, it's mine. It's mine. See all these inhuman creatures. Frankenstein. It's very sort of impressionistic, almost abstract, sort of, horde, all clawing after his humanity, and he's fighting to retain it. You've all taken enough, don't you understand? Enough. 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 And in the end, he's defeated all the psychological assaults on his humanity, and he's just clutching now the skull and the fragment of spinal column attached to it as he walks away. And you can see Frankenstein there with the button and the cross indicating death, and it looks like a rabid raccoon or something in the foreground. Oops, did it again. Enough. I need hesitate no longer. I am prepared for my journey, for my green odyssey. And you, my friend, you are the opener of the way. Your cells sing what the grass sings. Your molecules spin like flywheels in the vast, soft clockwork of the wilderness. You are in touch with the green, and I am in touch with you. Flips the switch. Eyes roll back in his head, and things start to go crazy. It's dark, it's cool, it's green. Please let me rest. No, you can't rest now. If you sit down here, you'll never get up again. Come on, keep going. Show 'em what you're made of. You keep nagging. Why should I carry you when you keep nagging? Because I'm your humanity. I'm important. I'm what keeps you going. You could let go of Linda, but you can't let go of me. Oh, I'm a little beaten up and battered, but I'm still worth all the effort, aren't I? After all, without me, there'd be no point in running, would there be? No. No point at all. Hey, what is this? Get up, come on, get moving. This is the human race. You have to keep running or you get disqualified. Hup, hup, come on. Listen, I know how you feel, believe me. I know that things look bad, but listen, every cloud has a silver lining, and a rolling stone gathers no moss. And he just gets absorbed into his body. And he has accepted a quest to return to the world, to the conscious world. He wants to fight for his humanity, even though he can't be human. He can never be Alec Holland, but that's all he wants to be, really. And this whole segment here is clearly Alan Moore making a play on Hamlet, where Hamlet has a soliloquy with the famous legendary soliloquy with the human skull, to be or not to be, that is the question. And that's exactly what Swamp Thing is asking himself now. And so hence he's holding the skull, which is just symbolic or representative of his humanity. Doesn't really exist. And so that's definitely his Hamlet moment. Particularly, you see this first panel on the second page here. So that's pretty amazing. By alien experience, by new perceptions, this feeling, this burning coolness, my roots drink through thirsty filaments, the rushing lava taste of the phosphates, that languid hydraulic ballet. I am the plant. And beyond the plant, what? I sense something. Other consciousness pressing in, the grass outside. I lie, a million silver blades threatening the moon. And the trees. I am the trees. A boa of moss hangs around my shoulder. I feel the intricate genius of the lianas, the giant timeless wisdom of... But how? Far away is the nearest redwood. How far am I reaching? Not Northern California. Surely. I'm withering with a yellow Arctic poppy. Up on the slope of Alaska, so cold. No, enough. I drift with the seaweed off Samoa. Somewhere in Russia, I incline toward the sun as a field of sighing gold, and I know... Feel the chrome dustiness of Australia, the teeming undergrowth, Shrek, of Africa, of the Amazon basin, and birds asleep on phone lines erupt in terror, and the shining eyes and the creeping teeth and all the tall grass freeze motionless, and the leaves are hissing like cottonmouths, and the branches are thrashing a lethal maelstrom of storms. Of thorns, and the Floronic Man is screaming. Incredible double page spread with all of these elongated vertical panels, and just again almost an abstraction of his just sensory overload. He wanted to become one with the swamp, one with everything, all the plant life in the bayou in the way that the Swamp Thing was, but instead it just took him across the entire world in tune with everything, all of nature in the farthest reaches of the world. And it's just this too much sensation, too much sensory overload, and also too much pain because of all the ecological and environmental damage. The ecology is constantly under assault, and he's feeling all of that sensation, all of that pain, and of course it's driving him mad. If he wasn't already, which I don't think he was. The Floronic Man is screaming and screaming and screaming. Stop! Please just stop. What would you have me do? And somewhere in the writhing jungle of his mind, the small and scared mammal that was Jason Woodrue twitches once and then lies still. It begins to rain blossom. He is the Floronic Man, and all that was once human in him is consumed, engulfed, swamped. The last vestige of his humanity is gone, and much like Arcane was working at polar opposite goals from Swamp Thing, the Floronic Man is definitely doing so as well. And he has, just as Swamp Thing has fought his subconscious and determined to return to consciousness and fight for his humanity, the Floronic Man sought to relinquish his humanity, which he hated the meat world and human beings. He's a very misanthropic plant, and now he's fully become plant life and has completely relinquished all humanity. And that's very bad news, because without that semblance of humanity, he's about to become a lot more evil. And you see here, issue number 23, again, a cover by Tom Yates. I'll get through this one, and then I'll end it until part 2, if my voice survives. There is a red and angry world. Red things happen there. The world eats your wife. It eats your friends. It eats all the things that make you human. And you become a monster. And the world just keeps eating. I couldn't take that, being eaten. I couldn't take the red world, so I walked out. And I left my body behind. And I'm somewhere else now. And this is, again, Swamp Thing. This is called Another Green World. The same creative team. Absolutely beautiful 2-page spread. You can see that Bissett and Toleben were really starting to gel very quickly, actually, because they only started in the prior issue. But, yeah, absolutely beautiful. So much detail, flora and fauna, and a joyful page for a change after so much darkness. Somewhere quiet, somewhere green and timeless, I drift the cellular landscape stretching beneath me, eerie, silent, beautiful. My awareness expanding out through the forgotten root systems. Am I at peace? Am I happy? Yes. Oh, yes. And yet there's a sense of something foreign among the green. Something wrong. I search for it, mind feeling its ways through the filaments, the fibers. Ah, there. So, he's determined to recover his humanity. He was starting to feel happy. And of course, this brief moment of joy interrupted. This red organism, representative of a Floronic Man, has once again destroyed the peace. There, I saw it again. Stewie, you really are sick. Hey, Demont, you comatose blob of butter. Stewie, just saw the Jolly Green Giant. Isn't that totally sick? Leave me alone. It wasn't a Jolly Green Giant. It was just I don't know, look like a guy with leaves on his head or something. I'm gonna take a look. Hey, Stewie, pick me up a can of Mexicorn. It's for my mother? Mm-hmm. Looks a lot more intimidating now. And something has happened where the site is now not working, and I am very unhappy about that. Okay, here we go. Momentary freeze. Okay, Rat Breath, you win. You were right. Nothing there. Andy? Andy, what's this stuff on my car? This is my dad's car, man. Hey, Andy. Oh. Completely strangled. He screams and runs. Huffing and puffing, and then the vines finally catch up to him and hang him there. There's something cold and ugly brushing against me. Black images congealing like tar. There's a creaking of boughs, an Adidas sneaker twirling in the hot breeze. There's something that walks the deserted night, roads toward the sleeping towns, something that rustles. There is another mind in the green, a red mind. It crawls like cancer, painting everything with the sticky darkness of old blood. I feel a name, Woodrue. Woodrue. Who is Woodrue? Did I know him once back in the Red World? I forget so much. I remember a man who drank. What was his name? Not Woodrue. He had a wife, a beautiful wife, white hair like an avalanche. Abigail. Yes. Abigail. She's out on her own again. Out on her own after dark. It's a silence. When there's trouble, she needs silence. She's been on her own a lot lately. It's been a long time since she needed the silence so much. Since she was a kid, in fact, up in the Balkans. None of the other children liked her. It was the white hair. They'd see her walking alone and they'd call after her, "Crazy Abby, crazy Abby, crazy Abby." She wasn't crazy then. She isn't crazy now. It's just that she's frightened of her husband. It's just that her best friend has given up on being human and turned into part of shrubbery. It's just that sometimes she imagines things. Terrible things. That's not an Adidas sneaker there. That's definitely a Nike swoosh in the left corner. And what she's imagining, she's not imagining at all. The terrible thing is quite real. For instance, sometimes she imagines that she's being watched, that she's surrounded by something alien and hostile. They call this paranoia. Paranoia isn't so bad unless, of course, it's really paranoid schizophrenia. Paranoid schizophrenia is pretty bad. Sometimes you see visions, things that can't possibly be happening. Good old crazy Abby. Of course, the important thing is to remember not to start screaming in case you find that you're unable to stop. Try to confront your fears. Try not to run away from them. And if all else fails, call a friend. Alec! Alec. I knew an Alec once. Was that Woodrow? Alec Woodrow? No. Alec Holland, of course. And Alec Holland. Alec Holland was me. No, he wasn't. That was the trouble, wasn't it? I thought I was Alec Holland, but I learned differently. That's how I came to be here. How did it happen? I remember being shot, then waking up cold and wet in the Sunderland building. What was the name, Sunderland? I followed the signs to some sort of main office. There were some notes about me. I read them, they told me everything. And the author's name was Woodrow. He reached La Croix at 1:32 a.m. La Croix, population 559, is a small town 4 miles south of Thibodeau. The destruction began almost immediately. The police house was first, and then the school, and then the church. By 1:38, most of the population was out on the streets. From then on, things got worse. The sheriff, one Ed Cutler, fired twice upon the figure at the center of the devastation. After that, the townspeople offered little further resistance. At 1:45, he made a number of requests. The first was that a video camera and a tape recorder be produced from somewhere. The second was that a number of the populace return to their homes and close the doors and windows. Many were glad to comply with that request. They didn't know. The requested equipment was produced by a boy who owned both a cassette recorder and a video camera. Stepped forward. His name was William Anslinger. He was asked to film what followed. First, the houses re-entered by the selected townsfolk were sealed with a proliferation of moss and vine. Effectively, they were airtight. In almost all of these houses, there were one or more potted plants. These began to accelerate their photosynthetic process, pumping out pure oxygen at an alarming rate. As they became hyperoxygenated, the people within the houses grew nervous. They grew excited and nervous without knowing why. At 2:15, someone lit a cigarette. It was like a string of firecrackers, and Billy Anslinger filmed it all. His parents and elder sister had been in the third house from the left. At 2:45, he was allowed to leave La Croix, carrying the video camera and the cassette. The cassette contained a message recorded by the creature responsible for the carnage, Woodrue. Some of these scenes remind me quite a lot of Moore's Miracle Man as well, or Marvel Man in the UK. It was Woodrue's name, his name on the notes, his mind in the green. It is Woodrue who's done all of this. Woodrue. He took my humanity away from me, caused so much agony. And when I thought the agony was over, that I'd found peace, he tainted that as well. Alec Woodrue. They wouldn't let me be human, and I became a monster. They wouldn't let me be a monster, so I became a plant. And now you won't let me be a plant. You. Alec, for God's sake, I'm scared. Wake up, Alec. Alec, please. You, Woodrue. Did you have to take everything? Everything that I loved. Alec, they've got my legs. You should have left me something, Woodrue. Please. You shouldn't have forced me to give up all this. I can't. Hold on. Alec, oh God. Oh God, you can't hear me. And finally, he starts to break through. And awakes, disrupting all the frogs and the amphibians and more frogs and dragonflies and ripping up roots, uprooting ferns. Another incredible drawing. And awakes to be face to face with Abby. Alec? No, not Alec. And the Swamp Thing walks, and the woman follows. She doesn't want to be out on her own. Not on a night like this. Billy Anslinger reached the police station in Chenille at 3:36 a.m. Chenille was 5 miles north of Houma. It wasn't a big town. And Houma is actually where they're staying in their hotel. So they were 5 miles away from some of this, from Chenille. There was green juice all over his shirt, and no one could make sense of what he said. He kept asking for Beth. Beth Anslinger had been his elder sister. At 4 o'clock, Sergeant Luther Galen decided to listen to the tape the boy had been carrying. At 4:20, he hassled up the necessary equipment and watched the video. Then he called Morgan City, and Morgan City called Washington, and Washington called the Justice League. Now that's a big twist. He'd seen the video. He was enough of a gardening man to know what it meant. He wanted to be home with Janie and the kid. His shift didn't finish till 6. He went home anyway. When he got home, he woke up Janie and told her as much as he could. They decided not to tell the kid. Janie started moving the houseplants outside. He went and fetched the big drum of paraquat from the garage. Paraquat is an incredibly powerful pesticide, I do believe. It actually kills trees. While he was killing the lawn, the kid woke up and wanted to know what was going on. He let Janie feel that one. At the bottom of the garden, there was a magnolia tree. Janie had planted it when they had moved into the house 20 years ago. It was a good old tree. They have their names carved in it, Luther and Janie. Steve had built a tree house in it the summer before last. Luther Galen wasn't a young man. Job took a long time. So, in total fear of what the Floronic Man can do with all of these plants, he's killing everything around his house to protect themselves from it. But that would more likely only enrage the Floronic Man even more. The job took a long time. In fact, it seemed to go on forever. The killing. No more, please. No more. No more. Did you say no more when you and your fellow hamburgers were stripping the land bare? When they dipped their chainsaws into the tender flesh of my people? Did you say no more then? There will be more. Lots more. For I am wood rue. I am the pain and the bitterness of the woods. I am come to announce the Green Millennium. I am the wilderness. Its will works through me, for I asked of it, saying, what would you have me do? And it said, purify. And it said, destroy. Destroy the creatures that would destroy us, that would destroy the ecosphere with their poisons and their bulldozers. Cut them down like bladed wood. Let us have another green world. That's what it said to me. Reasonable ecological statement. Another green world, as there was the beginnings before the beasts crawled up out of their oceans. Those long green centuries where no bird sang, where no dog barked, where there was no noise, where there was no screaming meat. Angie, for I am the regret, the anger of the forest. I, Woodrue. No more. These big panels, these 2-page spreads and these splashes. These 2 huge panels here, just so beautifully drawn. Oops, again. Beautifully drawn. So that is it. Next is Roots, which is also excellent, but that's the first, I think, let's see, 20 through issue 23 of Saga of Swamp Thing by Alan Moore, Dan Day, Steve Bissett, John Totleben, edited by Lynn Wein, colored by Tatjana Wood, and lettered by John Costanza. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with the second part next time. But in the meantime, feel free to like, and please leave a comment if you enjoyed it, or if you didn't enjoy it, or if you have any thoughts at all about Swamp Thing. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.